Hi, this is Ian Beabout from Prog Rock Deep Cuts, and joining me today is Jose Zegarra Holder and Adele Schmidt, directors of Romantic Warriors 3, Canterbury Tales. So, a couple of simple questions first for you folks. The first one is, how did you become interested in filmmaking?
Well, I think we both are film lovers, and I, of course, have a training in filmmaking. I'm a filmmaker since the last 15 years, and I think it's natural that we are into filmmaking. You know, I'm a producer since the last 15 years. I have produced over 10 PBS documentaries, and the interest in the topic brought it finally together to work on films.
I have been an film buff since I was a teenager. And after I met Adele in the early 90s, she and I formed a video production company called Media Sur Production that produced Adele's first film. After that, I've been involved in a variety of ways supporting her career. And it was not until taking her to her first Near Fest in 2008 that it occurred to us that a documentary about the progressive music scene was due. A documentary that we ended up producing and releasing in 2008, the first Romantic Warriors movie of the progressive music saga series.
So how did you both discover progressive music?
So during the late 70s, I listened to mainstream progressive bands of the time, among them Genesis, King Crimson, Jazz, ELP, Premiata Forneria Marconi, Jethro Tull, etc. And I continued listening for a few years in the 80s. However, I suddenly stopped caring for this type of music until the early 2000s. And when due to the internet, I guess I discovered that whole universe that was waiting for me to actually dig it. And bands all around the world actually playing this music. So it was for me a big bang explosion in my mind. I mean, about this scene. I was never suspecting that it was so big.
Right.
Yeah, and in my case, I of course heard these mainstream progressive rock bands in the 70s as a teenager, Genesis and Pink Floyd, and all of those. And I certainly got completely disconnected and would not have, I think, rediscovered it without knowing Jose. Because he was, since we are, married in the 1990s, listening to, all these new kind of bands, the new progressive bands, and so I got little introduced to it. But I think the real kick happened in 2008 or 2009 in Near Fest, where we decided to actually do a film about it.
Okay. Your second film, On Rock and Opposition, is one of the best documentaries on progressive music I've ever seen. Why did you decide to tackle this particular subject?
I guess that as a result of our first film, we got to know very well Steve Feigemann from Uniform Records, who, and then we had one of his bands, Cheer Accident. You must have heard of them before.
Of course, yeah.
The first film. But the fact of the matter was that we were really surprised that the whole rock in opposition movement was not very well known in the progressive rock forums or scenes that we have discovered in the internet. I mean, no one was talking about the rock in opposition scene. I mean, it was kind of a jam waiting to be like unearthed from the ground. I mean, it was just ready to be, exposed.
Yeah, and I think for us, we just finished Romantic Warriors 1. It was released, and in that same year, Universe Zero came to Washington, and I think there we had that idea. Why don't we do? I mean, everything came together. Why don't we do Rock and Opposition? In spite of the fact that rock and opposition is, of course, much more niche than general progressive rock. So we said, well, let's try and do a film on rock and opposition, and that's what we did.
Okay, so on to the current film. Just as a general definition for our audience, can you give us a an idea of what the Canterbury scene is.
Yes, well, the Canterbury scene is a term used to describe a group of musicians that, let's say, progressive rock and jazz musicians that many of whom were born or were based around the Canterbury, Kent County in England,
Mm-hmm.
and which basically a few bands actually were founded in Canterbury, and from there all these members get to know each other, and later they form other bands with other people outside of Canterbury, and the fact of the matter is that the music that they created was I would say a precursor of the jazz rock movement in Britain. So all these musicians later formed other bands, and eventually critics started to group them into a category which basically put all these bands together, because they actually had this original members in them, and then that's it. I mean, just the labels stick, and that's what we have today. Just a group of bands that are labeled Canterbury.
Yeah, well, in the film, you will, I think that is what we try to all somehow develop in the film. You will realize that the Canterbury scene is, of course, not a music that you can categorize in one specific kind of music, because it goes in different directions. You have at one hand more the jazz rock approach, what finally, Soft Machine, took. And then you have more a pop approach, of Caravan and other bands. So it's not a musical genre itself, It just they called it Canterbury because all these musicians, as Jose already said, came from that area, and they formed a lot of different bands, and so that will be discussed. There is no kind of someone who is defining it and that's it, because you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Most that musicians in the film will say, well, there is no Canterbury scene.
Mm-hmm.
The music, you can't combine it. So there's like that going on in the film as well.
So you would say there's no real defining sound, there's more of a spirit?
Oh yes, no, there are sounds defining, but it is a very, very vast spectrum of sounds.
Mm-hmm.
You can't put it under one category.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I guess the film will explore some of these points of view from coming directly from the members of the bands supposedly being Canterbury. And so we'll have to wait until the film is released to actually know what it means.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you will be seen. I mean, we won't give our little secrets away, but things are discussed there, right? And there are moments. There are very specific moments. What happened in the time back then that defined the sound, and in these moments they happened, and they will be described in the film.
Excellent. Yeah, no spoilers here. So I've always thought of the Canterbury scene as being a very English phenomenon, and like you said, but I was surprised to see that bands like the Moving Gelatin Plates, and of course more recently Forga's Band Phenomena from France, Super Sister from the Netherlands, and The Wrong Object from Belgium. What makes these groups part of the Canterbury scene?
Well, in essence, all these bands actually heard Soft Machine or Caravan or even Gong at the time. I mean, these bands were created after these original Canterbury bands, started being broadcast in radio stations across Europe. So, but all of them actually, I wouldn't say that the music that they created were copying or imitating any of these other bands from Canterbury, but they were certainly influenced, and they were sharing the same spirit and the same. They were living at the same times, obviously. After '68 and '69 and the '70s, I mean, the hippie movement and all these festivals, music festivals in Europe, all of that created more or less the same spirit. And these bands actually, were playing rock But at the same time, we're experimenting with introducing some of the jazz harmonies and music into the mix. So all of these bands actually share that trait, is that they introduce jazz into the rock mix. So it's not a progressive rock, pure progressive rock. It's more progressive jazz rock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as Jose said, a very important fact is that the Canterbury bands, these English bands from Canterbury and around Canterbury and from London, they toured a lot in Europe back then, a lot. So they exposed that music to an audience and also to musicians, and they picked it up. So when we, talked to Robert from Super Sister, no, and he said, well, I heard Soft Machine and I understood exactly what they were doing, and we, tried to adapt it to our sound, and everybody somehow refers having heard Soft Machine and having heard other bands from Canterbury,
mm-hmm.
And that was important for these bands.
So why did you decide to base the third film on the Canterbury scene?
Well, I think it was a very logic connection with the rock in opposition movement. So the rock in opposition scene is very small in size. I mean, in comparison with other, let's say, genre or subgenres of the progressive music space, in the sense that there are really not a lot of fans. I mean, you're counting maybe 1,000, 2,000 fans altogether that are really buying the albums, the records. And of course, that number can be a little bit bigger, but in general, it's a very small space. Now, the Canterbury space is also very small. It's also very unrecognized, and we also thought that it was, kind of a good size for us. I mean, you have to imagine that to do a film about any of these topics, requires a lot of resources. And a lot of bandwidth on our side. I mean, doing the research and actually getting to interview some of the bands. If we really want to do a documentary, we need to narrow our scope. It's impossible to come up with an idea to film an entire genre in one film. I mean, it's impossible. So what we like to do is normally narrow down the scope to a size that we can manage.
Yeah. And when we did Romantic Warriors 2, all the time, everybody always mentioned Soft Machine.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, but no, Soft Machine doesn't belong to Rio. Soft Machine is Canterbury. So then and I said, we have to do Canterbury, because everybody is somehow mentioning this, and it is important, and even if it is also, small subgenre, it is important to make a film about it. Because it is important for us, to bring these out, to a wider audience, that people learn about this, And as we are doing our series, it's just another part of it.
It is adjacent. I mean, the groups of fans of rock in opposition actually do like Canterbury
mm-hmm.
Music. So there's an overlap between the two. So that helps us too.
Also in the fundraising, because people who have supported us in the two first previous films, they're supporting us now.
So how much of the film is done at this point?
We have filmed about 80%. That means all, the interviews and the B-roll, all the material is shot. We still are planning to interview Richard Sinclair, who is in Italy, and David Allen.
Oh, fantastic.
They are very important for this film. So that still has to be done. But the good thing is we already have started the editing, and we have already, about 40 to 50 minutes of a rough cut. And that is very, very great, because that gives us a very, very solid, base to where we can actually, we are standing on that. We have this already. But there's a lot of work still to do.
So you showed the last film at a lot of festivals, and I think I read somewhere that a couple of local stations carried it. Did you turn anybody onto this music who hadn't heard of it before or hadn't even considered themselves progressive music fans?
That happens. It happens a lot. I mean, if you that happens especially in screenings where you have the film screened to people that are not necessarily from that audience, you know, and people have watched the film without knowing about progressive rock and have started buying the music of the musicians.
For example, what just happened in Japan. Japan is about to organize its first Rock in Opposition festival. Mm-hmm. I mean, they actually bought the movie, and they were incredibly interested in all this. I mean, for them, it was quite new. I mean, to be frank. Mm-hmm. I mean, they saw the movie. The movie was screening in 3 cities in Japan, in Tokyo, Okinawa, and some other city. And
now we have a festival. Yes.
That created an audience there, and this just created an exciting possibility for some of the labels there, or I guess the dealers, distributors there. So it's happening.
Yeah, I think that even for non-progressive rock fans, the movie is interesting, you know, because they learn about something. If you are an educated person, or if you are, you know, if you're into learning new things, you would love to see that film, and because it tells you about music and about people and about a story you haven't heard before. You know, we're leading you into a world you haven't. Maybe you have disconnected from it because maybe you have listened to it in your teenage years in progressive rock. But what we are doing is we reconnect you to it, and we make the bridge to the contemporary time, because the new bands are in the film. That's also important because they are carrying the legacy. So yes, I think it is interesting also for non-progressive rock people who are not necessarily in that group.
Well, one of the quick thing, Ian, is that as you know, the first Romantic Warriors movie was broadcast on PBS for about 2 years. And it was scheduled at very odd times, you know, very late in the evening, etc. And what happened is that many thousands of people actually watched the movie. And we received emails from people saying, hey, wow, that's great. I didn't know that the progressive scene was, you know, the progressive rock bands existed today.
Yeah, because people, you know, watching TV in the night, you know, tuning into PBS, and then they see suddenly that. And then you heard this, email sending to us or on discussion forum saying, hey, I was watching PBS and I saw that movie, and I tried to record it to find the record button because I couldn't believe that this is on the PBS, you know.
Yeah.
So that shows there is a hunger for this, and people would love to see this kind of content more on TV. Right, and that is our goal too.
It's like people lost track of this music. I mean, people forgot about it. So it's just very rewarding to actually see that happening. That, you know, people is coming back and say, "Hey, this exists. Let's discover this music again."
Well, that's fantastic. So one last question, and I know this is probably the last thing you want to talk about. But what's next in the Romantic Warriors series?
I think that we are thinking in the Italian progressive. However, it's a very big responsibility. It's as you know, it's huge. There are thousands of bands, right. Italian bands, and it would be very hard for us to actually come with a set of bands to actually work with. So we have to actually come up to a decision because it's not easy. It won't be an easy thing to tackle.
Okay, I want to thank Jose Zegarra Holder and Adele Schmidt, directors of Romantic Warriors 3, Canterbury Tales, for joining me today. I really do wish you the best with this documentary.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care, Ian.
All right, you too.